Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astralclub. This is an interview with the Spirit of President John F. Kennedy. This was a big one for me. I was really I was really blown away. Before we get into it, just want to mention a few things. If you'd like to support the work of Astral Club, you can certainly do so on Patreon. When you join, you get a chat function. You can talk to everybody, and we've got well over 300 members now. There's a direct mail, where you can talk with each other, advanced podcasts, and a link in the description. You can always ask me questions, and I check it every day. If interested, there is a link in the description. Next up, astral projection lessons. I've had plenty of lessons with folks. We have a success rate around 85% right now. Folks who take the course and have told me they've been able to astral project. I figure the other 15% is just going to take a little bit longer. If you're interested in astral projection lessons, just go to the description. There's an email there. Just ask for more information. And finally, spiritual counseling. If you have experiences that you really can't tell your friends or family, I'd be glad to work with you. Okay, let's get started now. As I said, this was a big one for me. Interview with the Spirit of John F. Kennedy. I floated into the astral plane just past midnight in the physical world. I concentrated on the person of John F. Kennedy, who the 35th President of the United States. After a period of time I was kind of lost in an ether, and then I found myself before the man himself. Now, I flatter myself that I have his accent down, like organized crime. However, I will not do that to you because I always have people who complain if I try to do accents. So you're going to hear John F. Kennedy in my voice. So there you go. Of course, I didn't hear an accent because, it was all telepathic, but I imagined as we were talking that he was using his trademark Boston type accent. Anyway, he started with, Mr. Pyle, I hear you've been asking questions. This was John F. Kennedy himself, materializing in a dusky blue suit, his tie straight, his posture pure, presidential gravitas. Only the inconvenient kind, I said, floating beside him on a grassy knoll that shimmered with ethereal light. I said, please call me Rick. He smirked. Then let's go to it, Rick. I kind of broke up the questions because I prepared for this. I broke up the questions into various categories because I thought it would be easier to follow. This is on life and his family. Let's start with an easy pitch. What was it like being JFK? It was a mixture of privilege, pain, and performance. People saw the smile, the speeches, the style. But I was forged in illness and ambition. I had Addison's disease before anyone knew how to spell it, and a father who wanted a son in the White House like other men wanted one in Harvard. He paused, watching a memory ripple in the air, a dinner table in Hyannisport, laughter and political debate served in equal portions. I think it's important to realize that the Kennedy family, under the tutelage of the patriarch Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., was a very ambitious family. They had gained their money through, allegedly, bootlegging during the time when, of course, alcohol was outlawed, and in the 20s. And he was very ambitious for his family. Now, JFK's older brother, Joe Kennedy Jr., was supposed to be... Joseph Kennedy had this all planned out. This must have been a heck of a thing for these kids. Anyway, he had planned that his oldest son, who he had named after himself, was going to be the next president, a president of the United States. However, his oldest son perished in his last bomber mission over Germany. There was this dam that they were trying to destroy in Germany, and all the missions had failed. So there was this top secret mission, and the thing was, is they'd already done their 25 missions, but I guess Joe Kennedy had a loyal crew, and he asked them to do one more, and it was a top secret mission. Apparently, they had developed new technology, and the plane was supposed to be able to be steered by radio. The idea being that these guys would parachute out of the plane while the plane was steered by this automatic radio transmission into this dam to destroy it. Unfortunately, something went wrong, and the plane blew up, killing JFK's older brother, Joe Kennedy Jr. So what happened in the family is the mantle for the future president of the United States fell upon the next son, which of course was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And he served in the Navy and was awarded various decorations for bravery. He was the captain of this PT boat, and apparently it was sunk by the Japanese. And JFK, he was the captain, grabbed one of the men who had been injured in the boat, and he dragged him, swimming through the water for a long period of time to get to land to save this guy. So he was extraordinary, quite certainly. And as I said, this pressure to become the next president, the future president of the United States, fell upon him. But you have to remember, the Kennedys, very political family. I don't know what your family discussed over the dinner table. I know what mine did. And it wasn't this type of politics. But in the Kennedy family, it was politics. Anyway, JFK said, "I loved my family. I competed with my brothers, but loved them fiercely. Joe was supposed to be president, not me. When he died in the war, a door opened, and I walked through it. I tried to make the walk count." This is on the presidency. I said, okay, let's talk about the job, the big chair. What was the wait like? JFK said, "The presidency is a crucible. You age a decade for every year. And boy, is that not true. If you want to prove it, look up Abraham Lincoln's picture when he was elected in 1861 and he began his presidency. Then look him up 4 years later in 1865 at the conclusion of the very bloody American Civil War. And you'll think you're looking at somebody different because he aged 20 years in those 4 years. So, being the president, it comes with a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And, you age in that job. Anyway, he said the presidency is a crucible. You age a decade every year. But it's also a moment to carve your name in history. Not with ego, I hope, but with effort. I wanted to inspire, to call people to the stars, to service, to the better angels of their nature. He looked toward the horizon, and I realized the shimmering edge was the moon. They mocked me when I said we'd go there. But I believed in frontiers, outer and inner. This was on the Bay of Pigs. For those of you who maybe aren't that much into history or Cold War history, the Bay of Pigs was the American effort to overthrow Castro in Cuba, and it didn't go so well. It was a disaster. Okay, so I said, okay, let's dive into the Bay of Pigs. Kind of a pig of a plan, wasn't it? he chuckled. Finally, somebody who appreciates my humor. Anyway, he said, deserved. That was a baptism by fire and failure. I inherited it, but I owned it. The CIA handed me a plan built on fantasy and arrogance. I okayed it, believing the exiles would be welcomed as liberators. That was the thought. See, we had these exiles who left Cuba, who our army and the CIA trained, and the belief was that we would land them on Cuba with, weapons and everything, and that the people of Cuba would rally to them and, push Castro out of power. That didn't happen. Anyway, but Castro wasn't a pushover, and the Cuban people weren't waiting with open arms. I bet you they would today, though. They're suffering in Cuba. When it fell apart, I didn't pass the buck. That moment taught me never trust anyone who has a plan and plausible deniability. I think it's the measure of a man that, yes, of course, he takes credit with the victories, but he also takes responsibility for the failures. I'm constantly shocked by our officials, presidents, senators, congressmen today, who will never take responsibility for a failure. They'll blame someone else. The Democrats blame the Republicans. The Republicans blame the Democrats. It's this eternal game of pass the buck instead of being a leader and taking responsibility for your actions and for your failures too. I then said, so it toughened you. It sobered me. I realized the military-industrial complex Eisenhower warned about had teeth, and it expected me to be just another puppet. That was the day I stopped being their boy. On the Cuban Missile Crisis. Once again, we're in the Cold War here, and back in October of 1962, our U-2 flights over Cuba, the U-2 was a spy plane, took pictures, and it was discovered that nuclear missiles from Russia were being installed in Cuba. And we didn't like that here in the United States. And I was told, keep in mind, I was like a year and some months old at this point. But my father had been in the Army a few years before. And there was, he and my mother were concerned that he'd be called back to, back into the military to serve if there was a war. And I don't know that people truly appreciate just how close we came to World War III. Because what happened is, first of all, a lot of our military people were saying we have to destroy these missiles. Now, destroying those missiles would have started a war. And Kennedy decided on another course. Instead, he instituted, I guess I'm a history teacher, sorry. He instituted a naval blockade, which blockaded, Cuba, so that Russian ships that were on their way, by the way, with more missiles and other supplies, could not get through the barrier, at least not without fighting with us. So they came on their way, and it looked like the Russians blinked. Like Khrushchev, who was the head of Russia, it looked like he blinked, and he actually ended up, losing power over this type of thing. And so, there was a deal that was secret at the time that the missiles would be removed from Cuba, and then we would remove missiles that we had on their border in Turkey. That was a secret. That was a secret plan. Which is kind of a quid pro quo, but that's that's how it ended. But it came very close, very close. And there were war hawks on both sides that said, hey, we should, attack and fight over this type of thing. And Castro, of course, the leader of Cuba, he wanted to launch the missiles. Luckily, I think he was a little off. Luckily, the Russians were like, no, we really don't want to, destroy the country, destroy the United States, destroy Russia over this. And so we backed away from World War III. So anyway, I said that this leads us to October 1962, which of course was the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was 13 days that could have been the end of everything. How close did we really come? His face darkened. Even in death, I could tell the memory lived on him like a scar. He said, closer than most people will ever know. There were generals, my own Joint Chiefs, who wanted to invade, drop nukes, call Khrushchev's bluff. But this wasn't a poker game. This was a species extinction on the table. JFK went on, I chose back channels, compromise. I let Khrushchev save face. We removed our missiles from Turkey later, secretly. In public, I took the heat, but I kept the world from burning. Be thankful, because if Nixon had been elected instead of Kennedy, who knows what would have happened. Anyway, I went on. I said, and they hated you for it, didn't they? Some did. Hawks don't forgive doves. Okay, next up, I know this is what you've been waiting for. On his assassination. We were suddenly in Dallas. The spectral outline of Dealey Plaza shimmered around us. The motorcade crept forward, frozen in golden light. I said, so the million-dollar question, what happened there? JFK quietly spoke. He said, I was warned. I had dreams about it. You know who else had dreams? Abraham Lincoln. He had dreams himself about, he was on this ship, and this ship was heading for an unknown shore, and he was on it. I know his wife had some things going on too, and it's interesting. I mean, there's lots of comparisons between JFK and Lincoln, and obviously this is one right here. So like I said, he was warned. He had dreams about it. Jackie, who was his wife, had a bad feeling, but I believed in showing courage, not just talking it. I insisted on an open car. Our presidents nowadays will never ride in an open car. They're in a bulletproof limousine, and there's extra limousines that can be confusing. But back then, that was what JFK chose. So I said, was it Oswald? He smiled, enigmatic, just like in life. Oswald was there to take the blame. A rifle can be fired by one man, but a plot takes more than one pair of hands. Mafia boss Sam Giancana and an inner core of CIA agents plotted my assassination. A mafia boss of New Orleans was involved as well. Wow, I said. I understand the mafia had an axe to grind as they delivered the crucial Chicago vote that clinched your election. And then you loosed your brother, Bobby Kennedy, as Attorney General to prosecute them. But why was the CIA involved? The CIA found out I was planning to dismantle the agency due to their embarrassing failure in Cuba at the Bay of Pigs, and they wanted to prevent that from happening. If you want to know more, ask George Bush Sr. He knows it all. Interesting. I waited for more information, but he looked very done with that line of inquiry. On his legacy. I said, you ended your life at 46. What do you make of your legacy? I was a symbol more than a savior. I asked the country to do better, to reach higher. Civil rights, space, peace. I pushed the first domino. Others carried it forward. Some fell backward. But I tried. He looked skyward where a flag, United States flag, waved on the moon. It doesn't actually wave, of course. They put wires in the flag so that it looked like it's waving. Although right now I think the flag has actually been dyed white because the moon doesn't have atmosphere. Radiation hits it and it pretty much gets rid of the color, I think, at this point in time. Anyway, JFK, we chose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. That's from his speech. That wasn't just about rockets. It was about our spirit. He offered his hand. Tell them, Rick, the future isn't a gift. It's an achievement. Anything else? He grinned. If you ever talk with Jackie, of course, once again his wife, tell her I'm very sorry for everything and that I miss her. And I still think I'd have won in 64. It's nice to know that the politician is still there. With that, he vanished, leaving me drifting and wondering what might have been. That was the end. I returned to my body extremely excited and thinking some deep thoughts. If you like that, please hit the like button, share it with those of like mind, subscribe if you haven't already, and most of you have. Questions, comments. I'm sure you've got some questions. You know, what do you think about this? Would you have asked him some other questions? I mean, I did my best. I kind of prepared for this one because, you know, I wanted to have my thoughts organized. But, you know, I knew I'd have a limited time, and that's what I was able to... but you could let me know, what would you have asked? And comments. Love comments. This is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.